Hi, Sean Lee here, and this is Technique Talk for Paganini Caprice number 3. The A sections of this caprice are made up of octaves, and although some of these passages move quite fast, even the few passages where I do use real fingered octaves, I'm not sure that it really helps, so you can experiment with where you find it helpful, and of course the trills where it's required. And one thing I do is, even in the lower positions, I'll stick to 1-3 for the octaves instead of switching to 1-4. And the reason for that is that I'm going from the low to the high ranges of the fingerboard so much that I actually prefer to stick to one ratio of spacing. But aside from that, if you have a well-developed octave and fingered octave technique, then the A sections of this caprice just take some good old-fashioned practice. The B section is where things get interesting. We have fast, continuous 16th notes, string crossings, and in the left hand we have extending and compressing for various chromatic passages. These three things make for a relatively tricky section, but the minute you add the slur, this becomes weird. The first tip I'll give is that in Paganini's manuscript, he actually writes overarching continuous slurs, so it's really up to you where you want to change the bow. I would start by improvising the bowings, and as you get closer to your final tempo, you want to notice where you're making bow changes, whether it's out of technical comfort or if it's for phrasing. And then when you notice these things, go ahead and write them in so that you can keep repeating it with the same bowings early on. This will just reinforce your muscle memory a bit and help to link what's going on in the right hand with what's going on in the left hand. But back to the topic of the added challenge of having this all be slurred. In the left hand, this means that for every single note you play, the fingers need to stay down for a couple extra milliseconds each. If this were separate bow or a spiccato, they could lift much more quickly, but the fact that they need to stay down a tiny bit longer and all across the board, this means that the left hand is more likely to lock up and get tense. The way that I combat this is by bringing down the left hand fingers with a little extra articulation and also lifting them a bit extra high. I find that this extra motion actually helps me to keep the left hand a bit more loose and free. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with this approach and prefer to have a really efficient motion all the way throughout, no matter what, but it's just something that helps me. It's also worth noting that it doesn't look very pretty to move extra here, but sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. In the right hand, I take a similar approach. So when I'm playing under tempo, I try to make the string crossings a bit angular and move a bit extra. Normally under a slur, I would try to make string crossings round and smooth, but in this case, again, there's a danger of the string crossings getting a bit muddled up and the bow arm locking up. So I find that moving that extra bit gives me a bit more clarity, both in the sound that comes out and the articulation of the notes and the string crossings, but also a clarity of the physicality of what needs to happen, which leads me to my focus phrase for this caprice. My focus phrase for caprice number 3 is loosey-goosey. This is a reminder to do those things in the left hand and the right hand of just moving a bit extra and keeping things loose, and it's also a good reminder for the A sections. These octaves can get very fatiguing if you start to clench in the left hand. So those are my tips for this caprice. Hope that's helpful. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and practice hard but not too hard.